You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for InBetweenDrafts.com. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we're going to do a manga recap of One Piece chapter 1111, titled Sun Shield. And Travis, I'm assuming you're that person who chose both Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Shield. Am I right?
How did you do that? How did you nail that? Genuinely.
As usual, we're going to be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this point. I mean, I did the same thing, Travis. So if you have not yet read chapter 1111, be sure to do so now for free on the Viz website or the Shonen Jump app, linked in the show notes, as always. And remember, all new One Piece chapters, they're available to read for free up to 3 weeks after their official release. Or you can just read them whenever you want, anytime, if you're subscribed to Shonen Jump, which both of us are and do recommend you do as well. Now, Travis, let's see. We had a lot of W's this week based on last week. It's just tough because I feel like we keep nailing these One Piece theories. We keep getting things right. Yeah, we get things wrong 90% of the time, but 10% of the time, oh boy, we nail it. But it just makes me a little sad, because, well, there's no such thing as an internet community. That doesn't exist.
Yeah, the internet is not real. Of course, we are talking to each other through correspondence sent across the sea via ships because, for some reason we've decided to send them the most inconvenient way possible.
Right. So, I mean, we used to have a Discord. That did exist at one point, but then the Biden administration, with the help of Congress, they banned it. They said that China was using it to spy on us. And, oh, hold on. Rookie D Pirate, our producer, is slipping me over a note. Let's see, a piece of paper. That's weird. Usually he just texts. Oh, I'm confusing Discord with TikTok? Very funny, Rookie D Pirate, trying to get my hopes up like that.
Oh, yeah, no, now that he said it, we do actually have an In Between Drafts TikTok if you want to go ahead and follow that while that app is still legal in the United States.
Do we?
That would be super. We legitimately do.
I don't use TikTok, so I am I going to download TikTok just to get on the In Between Drafts? I don't know.
Yeah, we officially launched it. It's kind of existed in the ether, but we officially launched it last week at PAX. Did some fun things for that, so go meme it up over there. But yes, Rookie D Pirate's glaring at me about talking about a different platform. It seems that the Discord was not banned by the United States government yet. So what that means is we can still legally talk about One Piece spoilers in the In Between Drafts Discord server, which is linked in the show notes.
Yeah, that's super fun, but sometimes I want to do more than talk about One Piece. I know, Travis, that's ridiculous. Who even considers that? But it happens once in a while, maybe for like a couple minutes a day. Oh, well.
Oh, but for those 2 minutes, we do have other channels here, it looks like. I'm looking
besides
here.
One Piece spoilers?
Yeah, so I see something, Cinemaholics, whatever that is.
That sounds like a podcast.
Yeah, might be. What is this? Anime, something like that.
Anime. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, that's what it is. We got other things. Music. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Discord. I'm not going to do that bit. It's really painful. But there's a lot going on there. You could come talk with us about anything that we're covering on the site or just kind of what you want to talk about. We want to interact with you. So please pop on over and join the gang. We have a lot of fun. But John, I know sometimes you're a little shy. You're a little skeptical of your own theories, and you definitely don't want to get roasted in the spoilers chat every single time. So you might be thinking, Travis, it would be great if I could just send you a message in a way that doesn't immediately get me roasted on the public-facing internet, and I've got some news for you.
If people want to roast me and they want to tell me off, just do it anonymously. You don't always have to do it in the Discord. Not every day, maybe once a week, maybe twice. Like just send me that message in a private way. But I mean, oh well, I guess that doesn't exist.
That's actually great because the suggestion will help those folks out too. We have an email address as well.
This bit is taking too long. RookiePirateRadio@gmail.com. Email us now.
We are so sold out to the bits at this point. We have to see them through.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious solution is to start planning and not just trying to improv our way through it. Let's talk about this chapter. I think we've let the people suffer enough. They've moved forward. They've fast forwarded that with the button enough times at this point. Travis, let's talk about these main beats. No cover story.
Yes.
No cover story this week. But hey, look, we are treated to a beautiful color spread evangelizing a certain Jewelry Bonnie among the Straw Hat crew. I mean, yeah, sure, Vegapunk and Kuma are there too, but I mean, Bonnie's up there like eating fries with the weakling, two of the weakling trio. You know, it looks like an homage to Sabari Archipelago, which is where we met.
Look, John. It says based on a reader request, so it sure sounds like Oda took some specific liberties instead of just putting. I'm just saying.
Straw Hats.
It does.
Strolling through the deep sea.
It does. It does say that.
Does that mean Kuma, Vegapunk, and Bonnie are going to join the crew? Let's say yes.
I mean, it says it right there. The Straw Hats. What are you going to do? They're all having fun. I'm not going to argue with it.
The copium is real, but we'll have to move on. It's that simple. There are things that I want. There are things that Oda wants. They're not always in the same universe. But okay, the chapter kicks off with Saint Mars, aka Itsumade, still trying to break through the Labophase barrier, catching Jinbei's attention as the Fishman finally catches up to Zoro to pick him up from school. Zoro has pretty decisively defeated Lucci, but the stubborn fool is pulling a nothing happened and is just standing there, bloodied and upset. Sort of like when I win a theory argument with Travis Hymas in the Discord. Now, Jinbei finishes Lucci off with his 5,000 brick chop move, knocking Lucci back into his human form. It's pretty awesome. Mars immediately confronts Lucci, calls him by his cipher pole name to ask where York is. Lucci apparently just figures out immediately that this bird creature is somebody who's in charge. He just tells him everything because he clearly doesn't recognize him, but he's like, well, here's all the information. So he tells him the Straw Hats plan to escape from the back exit of the Labophase, where York is, all that stuff. Also that the Seraphim are in the lab basement, plus that Vegapunk's message is going to resume in 6 minutes. He also pleads with Mars to save Kaku's life, but Itsumade makes no promises. In fact, Mars is basically being like, who cares? Back to the main fight, Luffy and the Giants relish in seeing each other once again, and Luffy's referred to by Brogy as resembling the form of the god spoken of in Elbaf, and they are huge, big fans, even though Luffy has no idea what they're talking about. The Giants refer to the Gorosei as colossal beasts that look like they came from Elbaf's forests, which is pretty interesting, and Luffy tells them they just need to run away. Oda even shows us a nice map detailing everyone's location and how close everyone is to escaping. Dory then sounds a horn to announce to the other Giants that they have found Luffy and can now withdraw from Egghead. But Workery refuses to let them escape and uses a Color of the Supreme King roar that is apparently so broken it causes Luffy to lose his hat, sandals, Zoan, clouds, and even his scar for a brief moment. Cannot wait to see that in the anime. Workery tries to charge next, but the Giants manage to block him with their sun shield. And you called that, Travis. You said the boar would charge. Workery retorts by claiming we, as in the Gorosei, have much to settle with their kind, being the Giants. But Dory and Brogy brush him off and knock him back with a shield attack. Watching all this, Saturn is still around. He prepares his own attack and notes that the Giants must be crushed before they call Luffy something else. He spits a bunch of poison balls or pebble things, so Luffy pulls one of his biggest Looney Tunes moments yet in Gear 5th. In a split second, and I mean literally a split second, the sun god Luffy grabs a palm tree, chomps it down with his teeth into a baseball bat, paints it black, has the time to put his own number, 56, on it. He puts on a helmet, also with 56 on it, and then home runs the poison pellets right back at the Gorosei, only to watch the balls kind of explode, much to his surprise. Well, the Giants are thrilled with Luffy's attack, blocking up the forest, much like half the fandom. But Luffy lets them know that they're immortal and will just bounce back again, which the Giants remark something they've never heard of in terms of a power or a race of people. So they laugh it off and agree to start running away. Meanwhile, Bonnie and her own giant crew finally make it to the escape boat, but are confronted by 2 vice admirals, and it looks like there's going to be a big fight there. We quickly cut to Itsumade, who has apparently broken past the barrier at this point and found York. Itsumade asks York to tell him where the room from the monitor is in order to stop the broadcast, but York is terrified and has no idea who is talking to her. Then we shift right over to Kizaru back on the Navy battleship, as he is still on his back and refusing to get back into the fight, claiming he's wounded and wants to rest. But honestly, Travis, it just kind of seems like he's pretending to be asleep. He probably could get up, but he's like, can't, I'm wounded. That's right. Yeah. And then the chapter finishes off with the Marines reporting that something larger than even the giants has appeared on the island and is marching from the northwest coast, ignoring the flames of the battle entirely. We see it is the Iron Giant, awakened by Luffy's heartbeat at last and on the move, muttering, "Sorry, Joy Boy," to no one in particular. 3-week break. No One Piece for almost a month. And that's okay, Travis, because we got so many things right for this chapter that we could use a break. I mean, oh boy, where to begin with this one?
Woof, I gotta be real with you. I'm starting to feel like Oda is in fact a listener of the show, which makes me regret all of that bit we were doing at the beginning that much more.
Yeah. He's like, fine, I'll put the giant back into the story. Yeah, it had to happen eventually.
We'll cut it down to time for you next time, Oda. Enjoy your break. Anyway, jeez, how cool is this?
It's so cool. Everything.
Cool. It's so cool.
It's a full-on battle, and it's a fun battle. It's like such an interesting one. Where do you want to start?
I want to start really quick with what I think I want. I don't want to say the word correction, but the way that I kind of interpreted Itsumade getting into the barrier. I'm pretty sure that he's actually cracked through when Jinbei sees him. So everything at that point is him in the labo phase at this point, trying to find the monitor.
I was wondering that too. It was hard to tell, honestly, and I couldn't.
This is one of those things. This is one of those things where like the anime will help because they can make the barrier a color that will still like represent the invisible barrier, but not necessarily allow us to like lose context of it. So it seems like that's the case, which makes it all the more impressive that Jinbei and Zoro got away. It does make me wonder, though, because Rob Lucci does, in fact, look like he doesn't recognize this form. That makes sense. That's not too surprising. But either their voices must be similar enough to be recognizable, or Rob Lucci just kind of knows, hey, this guy knows who I actually am. He must be a boss, theoretically.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like he calls him Cypherpole Aegis Zero Rob Lucci. I think like he doesn't recognize this person. This person recognizes him. I think he's smart enough to realize what's going on. That
Bare
is somebody
minimum.
in charge, and he just kind of goes with it.
I do enjoy kind of the look of awe on his face at first, like of just. It's nice to see that terror even in characters who genuinely have never expressed that, Like surprise Rob Lucci, we've seen a lot of that. Like impressed Rob Lucci, we've seen that. But this is like awestruck for a moment.
This is like, am I about to die?
it's cosmic horror Rob Lucci is what it is. Like he has seen into the abyss and it has stared back at him kind of thing.
He lost pretty decisively to Zoro. That there is no doubt about that. And then Jinbei just kind of was like, all right, well, since you don't want to go to sit down, because it looks like Lucci's like trying to move, but he can't really. And yeah, it is what it is. I think that we've had enough of this whole like debate on why didn't Zoro just one shot Lucci? We've talked about it to death. Clearly, Zoro's plan all along was to make sure that Sanji didn't get a go at this guy. But yeah, I mean, literally all the top 3 Straw Hats got their licks in for this character. It's pretty great.
Yeah, I saw some roasting of him, maybe next time he'll have a little bit of a better time with Sanji, and then after Sanji finishes him off, Usopp will, Usopp might let him win, but let's just move him through the ranks and just see how far he can fall. It's very fun.
There you go. I do, man. How fun would it be if we had like a Jinbei versus Sanji matchup at one point, because we all know that there's a little bit of bad blood between the two of them. It's like a frenemy situation. And I mean, they're getting closer, but
it's completely one-sided.
Yeah. Jinbei is just like, Sanji's my best friend.
Yeah, he's and like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's an office coworker relationship where like he did one thing to slight this guy, like accidentally ate his lunch or something, and and Sanji has just been angry about it for like 6 months and not told anybody else why, and it's incredible. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. And I can only imagine what the bounty conversations are going to be after all of this is said and done, because pretty much everybody does stuff on this one here. We're going to see a bounty increase, I think, just by default, regardless of how this all goes.
Yeah, except for Usopp, unfortunately. Loved seeing the Giants and Luffy fighting side by side. I mean, it's such a remarkable thing to see how far we've come, because Little Garden was so long ago, and at that point in the story, Luffy had no sort of, like, he wasn't on the same planet as these two in terms of his like power and capability. But now we're seeing the three of them fighting as like comrades in arms, right? And in some respects, like Luffy, it's not even that he's leading them. It's sort of like, it reminds me of like in a video game, the Party of Three, right? Where you have like the three characters kind of like, you know, fighting the big boss together in whatever video game, try like Dragon Age or Knights of the Old Republic, whatever you want.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. It really is just this wild. It's that sense that like we really are in a state that we've never been in before, like where we really are getting things out of the way so we could get to the ending, because we all wanted to see these characters again. We all wanted to have them reunite with the Straw Hats, to see that progress and everything. But I cannot think of anybody who would have picked a moment for that to actually happen, where it seemed feasible, where we would get a scene like this. And now it's just playing out. I do want to point out as well, because some people were not expecting this, but Luffy's like, hey, we need to go.
Yeah.
He is in fact not trying to defeat the Gorosei here. He's not trying to show off. He's not like, I'm never running again. He does seem to understand the situation and really is just doing this to buy as much time as possible. So that's good to see in a clarification.
Yeah. So Bodhi Archipelago taught him this, and we've seen him like exercise that restraint before, like in Whole Cake Island. Luffy is just that kind of character who he has a good sense for this stuff. It doesn't mean he's perfect about it. He did, you know, go up against Kaido and Wano like at the very beginning, because that's our boy, and he does things like that. But I was talking about this with somebody who was remarking on like, man, Egghead is such a great arc. It's so fun. It's so interesting. There's so much cool stuff happening here. And they were sort of like, it's amazing that Oda doesn't do arcs like this more often. I'm like, well, that's kind of the point. Like the reason this arc is as good as it is, when you really think about it, yeah, we're in a new island, but almost nothing of this arc features like totally brand new characters out of nowhere. Like compared to something like Wano or Whole Cake Island, the two most recent. Wano is like lots of new characters we had never met before. A lot that we had, like Momonosuke, Kinemon, but there were new scabbards in there. Otama was thrown in there. Yasui was thrown in there. There were lots of new characters. We were in a new island. It was kind of like an episodic story in the saga of One Piece. But this is way more like Marineford, right? Because this is a culmination. That's what makes the arc so satisfying. It's stuff that's been set up for ages. We know who the Gorosei are. We've heard of Vegapunk a lot. Yes, there are new characters in the form of like the Vegapunk satellites, but they're all variations of something we know about already. They're not net new characters necessarily. But then Rob Lucci coming back into the story, Kizaru coming back into the story, and then our little world tour, right, that we deviated, and then Kuma's flashback. It's just felt like a Grand Prix, not to borrow from Dragon Ball, of just a lot of like huge moments that have been in the works for ages. And so I think that's been the kind of the key to why this arc is so successful, and the fact that it allows for these massive fights we've been waiting for so long. Seeing Luffy going up against, I mean, Travis, can we pause for a second? Like, our boy Luffy, Monkey D, is teaming up with the Giants against two of the Gorosei. One of them in the wings at the moment, the Sandworm Bro. What are we
Yeah, it's
what are we reading right now?
we have reached it's kind of a meme to say it, but we have literally reached peak, right? And this is coming on the tail end of an arc that feels like it should be 3 of them. Like just the idea again that like we cut away for months to go do. I remember on this very show where we would get to chapter where Blackbeard and Law were about to face off, and we're like, oh, that's an interesting cutaway. I look forward to checking back in on that when the arc ends. And then the next chapter comes out, and it keeps going, and we're like, wait a minute. Whoa, we're just doing, and then it would cut away to Kid and Shanks, and we were the same way. Like, oh, I wonder how this is going to go outside of Kid getting absolutely stumped. That was a year ago, and we've just had so much of that. In the meantime, everything is happening on Egghead. We're still missing a whole 12 hours of stuff that technically happened that doesn't really seem to matter anymore. But just
the Oda yada yada, because he was like, all right, I can show you the Labophase death game if you want, or I can show you way more interesting stuff, and then we'll come back, and then all the boring stuff will be done. Okay, Robin kind of saved the day, apparently, it's implied. And now all the Straw Hats are good to go. Next.
Credit where it's due. Oda does seem to be still able to even now pivot when something isn't working, or at least be able to decide, hey, this is actually the most important thing right now. So, we're gonna do that. And it's so wild to think about that we're here. It just still feels wild to experience. Where do we even go from here? So it's difficult to predict, outside of we're trying to get to Elbaf, right? But people are like, what happens if they beat the Gorosei here? What happens if they even stalemate it? How do you raise the stakes? How do you make the Holy Knights threatening now? There's so many questions that come out of the fact that just everything is happening. And it makes theory crafting very difficult to do at this point, outside of the moment-to-moment segments. But here we are. It's happening. Well, and it's taking a pause for a bit, but it's happening. That's... What else can you say?
Yeah, it's wild to think we started this arc the way that we did, with all right, it's the Vegapunk arc. And I think we had good reason to make assumption that is this is our stepping stone to Elbaf. A lot of big stuff will happen. We'll get revelations about devil fruits and some really big things that speak to the endgame. And yeah, that happened. That was part of the arc for sure. But then there was just this knocking sensation of One Piece isn't going to be business as usual anymore. We've reached another stage. Final Saga means what it means. And I just really appreciate the shift in storytelling, because honestly, we needed that. I think that for a lot of people, and myself included, the journey from Fishman Island to Wano was honestly a bit of a slog. It was a way too long of a saga, and it was a saga that, honestly, it was fun. I appreciate the memories, but it was one of those things where it's we knew that we were getting close to the really good stuff, but we were still kind of it felt a little bit like we were still wallowing in a transitionary period between Luffy post time skip and Luffy Yonko level. And it was when are we going to get to that point? And now we can enjoy it. We're at the top of the roller coaster, and it just feels like we're going downhill now in a good way.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I think I've said to you, I don't know if we've said it on air, but I think I've said to you before that it just, to me, it feels like Wano, even Oda was kind of ready to move on sooner than really was necessary. I do appreciate all the work that went into it, because selling the Gear 5th twist, all of it hinges on everything else that happens in Wano. If we had cut down on things, if we had made it faster, if we hadn't done all of the other fighting, it would not have worked. I do genuinely believe that. Yeah.
I read an interesting theory actually about how one of the reasons why people think Luffy was able to awaken his devil fruit the way he did, and if you go along with the theory that awakening a Zoan devil fruit is when your will matches the will of the fruit, and that can happen in a near-death experience, or in Luffy's case, pretty much death, and having to restart his heart with the fruit and all that. the theory that this person posited was on Reddit, so I can't credit it properly, but I saw it there. But they were basically saying, like, you could look at it as like in all the arcs prior, Luffy would go to these islands and he'd be there for a couple of days. And he would liberate these places, but he wouldn't really experience the oppression of these places firsthand. But Wano was the first time he did. He was there for weeks. He got captured. He was in a prison. He had the sea stone cuffs. He went through starvation. He like experienced a taste of the turmoil that the people there went through. And you can make the case that like one of the reasons he was able to progress as quickly as he did is because he took that like drumbeat of liberation unto himself in a way that just was like a totally different level for him. And I do appreciate that Wano is that arc because it is so personal to, I think, the entire story, but also Oda, of course. So I think that you're right. I think that it had to happen the way that it happened. And I think we agree.
I like that idea. It's one of those things where even the stuff like in the Goa Kingdom when Luffy was a kid, he doesn't really have the capacity to understand that. I would even say that he didn't have the capacity to understand what was going on in Wano, even back in Punk Hazard. I think a part of going through those few arcs, setting up, getting us to Wano, were kind of laying similar groundwork. So I like that idea. I don't know if it's necessarily that, rock solid, like this to this to this to this.
It's
exactly as Oda Planet, right? But it's, but like I like that from an analysis standpoint. I think that's a really good way to think about it because again, it's such a silly power up. It's such a goofy thing. I mean, we've had sun god stuff kicked around for decades, right? But the name Nika was introduced in the same arc. The idea that like all of these could be put under a single banner. That tying that to the fruit. I mean, none of us really fully made that connection of what it actually meant until it happened. So it was really, really hard to pull off. And we're doing that now as well with the Egghead stuff. There's a lot of questions we have about how the Gorosei work, right? Like Luffy's more or less figured it out. They're immortal for some reason. I hit them, they get hit, they get better. I don't get how that works right now. We don't have time to figure it out. And that feels a little bit disappointing for us because we don't get answers, but it does, I think, kind of loop back around to that idea of where do we go from here? This is not where the story ends. This is only where the end point of the story begins. So we could have several more arcs before before a Gorosei goes down, hypothetically. So we have to earn those moments as well. So these big moments of terror for things like Rob Lucci and everything, they're critical, even if it feels like we're dragging stuff out as a result.
I want to point out for sure another indication of how the Gorosei each have their own special flair when it comes to their weird powers. We've seen them kind of do different things with Warcury. Two notable things. One is that kind of Color Supreme King roar that he has that kind of disrupts. It's like hockey is so interesting. It seems to kind of like mess with Luffy's Choi Boy form, apparently, which is just such a funny visual gag. I mean, this whole chapter is full of I cannot wait to see this in the anime moments. But another thing that I thought was kind of interesting is that his tusks apparently turn into like giant swords when he attacks Dory and Brogy. And like, how does that work? Because they look legit like tusks in every other panel. But when he does like his big like wind up attack to charge, and they block him with a shield, those clearly look like blades. I don't know if that's just a trick of the panel or something. Maybe it doesn't.
No, I totally agree. I completely agree. That's exactly what it looks like happened. And what's more is like he charges, but it also looks like he leaps up to charge. Yeah, which is interesting as well.
His legs and feet are winding. Yeah.
Yeah, he's way more nimble than I thought looking at him when we discussed it. So all of that's very curious. Could this be just like hybridization? I don't know. Like I wouldn't have even, Ethan Barron pulling out his sword and going hybrid. That made sense. We all, would have expected that regardless of what form that took. But that the others could like make blades. We know Saturn could kind of change and warp his form. Is this just because they're mythical in nature? Not necessarily devil fruits, because we've kind of played with that idea that they're not. But just they also bend reality a little bit. Maybe they are, in fact, some sort of like inverted Nika power.
Yeah. Yeah, like twisting reality in some way. I mean, there are all kinds of things that we could throw at the wall. It's voodoo magic. It's black magic. It's something. It's something. I don't know what exactly. I love the moment when, like, okay, Travis, I got to do my whole thing with the baseball bat. I thought it was extraordinary. Did it work for you though? Because there are some people who are trying to.
It's so funny.
Yeah,
it's so funny. It's. Some people have tried. What were you saying? Some people have. Are you gonna say people were down on it?
I would say 90% of the responses I've seen have been overwhelmingly positive about it. Of like, I love Gear 5th Luffy. He's so fun. The story's so great with this edition. And then there's like a 10% where they're like, just seems like, it's not serious anymore. And I'm like, anymore? Like, okay. Like, yeah. One Piece, the serious, shonen manga. Like, yeah, okay. There's serious stuff in this, but it's always been silly. Do you remember when Luffy fought Crocodile? The boy literally like had to start punching him with blood, like in order to win that fight. Do you remember Katakuri?
Well, people.
Katakuri was a donut.
Yeah. Well, so people see those fights and they see the struggle, and they confuse that with serious. They see I would say they see the tension because it's depicted much more serious. Like Luffy grimaces, he looks serious, but we can dig. We don't even have to dig that much further to find something. When we had Allie on here to talk about like the East Blue, she said the thing that really like won Luffy over completely just was the best moment for her is when he puts Arlong's teeth in his mouth. And just goes, look, now I can do it too. Like, have you gone back and looked at the reveal of Gear 4th? Like, have you thought about that in recent memory at all?
He's our goofy boy.
He's
a joy boy. That's the point.
He is literally a balloon person. Like this idea that like One Piece isn't a gag manga. I always come looping back around. It's just like, are you sure about that? How, like, what was the last chapter you read? But this idea that like Luffy isn't taking it seriously, like this chapter should absolutely be like baseball bat included. This chapter should absolutely be an indication of how seriously Luffy's taking it. He is actively trying to stall for time. He is telling these two giants who he knows stone cold will stay here and fight until it's over. He knows that personally about them. He's telling them, no, guys, we gotta go. Yeah. He is very much aware of the situation. Just because his powers manifest in a way that is joyful, it has always been that way. It has always been that way. If it wasn't that way, his powers wouldn't work the way that they would. He would just be Mr. Fantastic. Like the gear system only works because he kind of doesn't care if he looks goofy as heck. Gear 2nd used to turn him into baby Luffy. Like, remember that? It's a punchline. It's always a punchline.
Chopper has the form of being like an old elderly baby.
Yeah, an old elderly baby somehow. It's supposed to be funny. Yeah. And people, people want, they want Demon Slayer out of this. And yeah, I picked one out of my head. Please don't yell at me. But like, that's what people seek. And that exists here. That's happening right now. I think that if there is something to criticize in this fight, it is against Saturn. I do think that we probably should have gotten maybe some internal monologue, some other form of indication of what his thought process was more than we got. Because to me, it very much seems like he was just being cocky this whole time. But it really kind of undersold the threat for a while now. And I think that more than Gear 5th is hurting people's perceptions.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, the Saturn thing I'm a little indifferent on at this point. But yeah, maybe when we have our post-arc rundown, we'll be able to really look at this stuff with clear eyes. I want to point out, here's something that I really hope happens. And who knows, maybe I'll be totally wrong. But when Itsumade finds York and everything, interesting that, like, okay, so they find York, probably going to take York. At that point, I would assume go to the room with the monitor. I hope Mars goes to the Seraphim and finds that they escaped. And the Seraphim aren't there anymore. I would love that so much, especially if the Cypherpole agents are like, the Seraphim are gone. Somebody broke them out. And it's like somebody, I don't know, Kaku or whoever, but it's somebody who like broke them out for whatever reason and they're off on their own. And that's our cover story. No, I actually did say the Discord. I hope the cover story is Kizaru getting like exiled or something after this arc, because I think that he's kind of screwed at that point. But before we talk about Kizaru, what do you think? Seraphim? Look, because Itsumari's probably not going to go for the Seraphim right away. What do you think?
It really sounds, the way Itsumari was talking to Rob Lucci, it really seems like he just doesn't care. It's like, whatever, you know, you could hypothetically make the argument that if you Buster called at the building, they would probably survive anyway. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't think they need to worry too much about it. But it's very clear
priority.
Exactly. He's not really there to get the Seraphim at this point. They're disabling the other pacifista. It's not like you need them to shut it down. In the event that S-Bear has the same failsafe, if not the rest of them, it's a liability to let them out. Like, I think it's just go get...
Stop the broadcast.
Stop the broadcast. Sorry, my mic cut out for a second here. Figuring out what's going on. Apologies.
Yeah, your broadcast got cut.
My broadcast got cut.
Look
It's
out,
cut the broadcast.
Tsumade, Travis.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that. They want to find the broadcast. They want to find York. That's the mission. Those are the two. He goes to Rob Lucci, gets the update, but specifically goes, where is York? That's important. York can hypothetically tell them where the broadcast is. York, of course, probably can't, but they don't know that. We'll see how that goes.
So that brings up another thing with York, actually, because York has been communicating with the Gorosei. So shouldn't York have known about the kill switch with Vegapunk?
Well, we've discussed this before, right? That it seems that the Vegapunks might be able to hide things from each other.
Why would they hide from York? They didn't know York was a traitor.
Well, that
Edison,
would be the question.
Pythagoras and Shaka knew about where are in the monitor. So why wouldn't York know about it? They do the sync every day.
Well, that begs the question, doesn't it? Why? I mean, it's one of those things where, York's reaction is not, I don't know. It's, I am terrified, so we don't really have a good answer.
The only answer I have is that York wants them to kill Vegapunk anyway.
Yeah.
He doesn't really care, but wants to be the Vegapunk. So
right.
It could just be that York could have known the message was coming, but wants Vegapunk to die, and so would withhold that information.
Yeah, I guess that's possible. Like the more that I think about it, the more that it does get a little bit messy, right?
Yeah.
Because
then York could just
do the whole
sabotage
thing
it in some way. Just be like, oh, I deleted it.
I mean, maybe there is something. It's one of those things where, like, the Vegapunks we've seen so far, it starts, of course, with the ones that are gone now, that just so happen to be kind of the more good/positive aspects. It's possible that it's some of them that are the more on the positive side, but maybe York does tell them, hey, it's in this room or something. To me, though, the idea that Stella would hold some information back as necessary seems like the thing to do, just because he's a scientist who definitely has plans in the back of his mind and fail-safes for fail-safes. The Bonnie thing is very telling of that. So this idea that he couldn't outplay the satellites entirely, I mean, that seems pretty reasonable logic for that regard. But we'll just have to see kind of what York actually says when Mars decides to transform back into a dude long enough for her to calm down. Or maybe he gets sick of it. Maybe he just gets sick of it, picks her up, and just is like, fine, I'll just burn the whole thing down, whatever.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I'm a little nervous about this because I don't want to accuse, Oda-sama of a misdeed. We gotta trust him.
It wouldn't be the first time that something like has to get put back together after the fact. Like, oh, this is actually why.
Because
I don't know. Yeah,
because
right.
Vegapunk only told these 3 satellites out of an abundance of caution, and like not even Lilith and Atlas knew. I'm sure. Okay.
I've seen it suggested before that that a part of Vegapunk's message here is going to include like current Egghead footage. Like a part of this plan was to out the Gorosei live. Getting, pulling that off, getting these certain pieces in line would have required letting some of this play out the way that it did. Even knowing like that seems like a bit of a leap, but I guess it would solve this little dilemma.
I guess. Let's move to Kizaru. You think Kizaru's faking it? Or do you think, okay, here's what I actually think. I don't think he's faking it. I think he's actually wounded, but they won't. I think they're coming up to him and they're like, hey, let us heal you. And he's like, no, I don't want you to heal me. I just want to stay defeated. And my thinking here is that it's not that he is like 100% incapacitated. It's that he doesn't want to fight anymore. His spirit is broken. He doesn't want to heal. It reminds me of that like behavior pattern of like punishing yourself. And I think he wants to just sit in that punishment and not engage in the fight. He doesn't want to fight. He doesn't believe in the fight. And he doesn't want to feel better. I think he's just so broken right now. And I love it. Stay broken, Kizaru. Don't let anyone heal you. Sit there and think about what you did, jerk. Killed your family.
Oh yeah, completely agree. He's done. I mean, what more is he going to do anyway? Like at this point, he's more or less in the way. The Gorosei themselves don't really seem too interested in figuring out where he's hanging out. And yeah, I think he's crying like a baby now because he did the bad thing that he probably should have done or didn't want to do, but was just following orders. And now here we are.
And we now know that, like, when push comes to shove, Luffy has the capability of defeating an admiral. And in this case, I think we knew that already. We had seen him kind of pull it off in a very strange circumstance. That doesn't mean that he's going to win every 1v1 with all the current admirals necessarily, because that's not this manga. This is a certain situation and a certain set of circumstances of willpower and what motivates these characters to do what they do. But at the same time, I mean, look, if you're a betting person between Luffy and Akainu, I'm going to say always bet on Luffy. And so that's my new mantra for the Luffy v Admiral fight. And I guess there's the Iron Giant. And oh no, did you have one? Is there something else?
I was going to say I'm very interested in seeing what Luffy versus an admiral whose heart's in it looks like.
Yes.
Not because I think he would lose, but because I think it would be a much more direct fight.
Serious.
Yeah, it would be serious. I think Kizaru, we've talked about it before. His heart's not completely in it. He's not actually, he wasn't super engaging during the fight. Like he wasn't fighting Luffy. He was trying to get around Luffy long enough to kill Vegapunk, right? Like, is that because he didn't want to engage with him? Is it because he knew he didn't really stack up against it? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, regardless of anything, a loss is a loss, right? Like we've got one. Luffy beat him. He's not getting back up, right? His will is broken, even if Luffy's not the one that did it.
For Admiral Endgame, I kind of like the idea of Kobe being the one who takes down Akainu, because then Kobe can be like, and I'm going to marry your daughter. And that's assuming that Hibari is really Akainu's daughter. But I know there's the whole thing of like revenge on Ace, but I think it would be more satisfying to see Luffy defeat Kuzan next. Just because I think he might be the only Straw Hat who can. I'm sorry, Zoro. I'm sorry, Jinbei and Sanji. I don't know if any of them could actually defeat Kuzan.
Oh man, Jinbei trying to fight Kuzan would be fascinating, because Fishman karate, like the reason it works is because it uses like water and the air, right?
What happens? He could hold his own. He could last, but I think Kuzan wins that fight.
It's a hard fight. I mean, I do think Luffy deserves to go rounds with Kuzan because he has taken an L from him before. That's one of the few like straight defeats he's suffered. So, much like it's satisfying to see Kizaru get beat because of Sabaody, I think because of Long Ring Longland, Luffy should go some toes. That seems pretty reasonable to me.
Especially if it's in a context of protecting Robin and you have the full circle. And I get people are like, well, hold on. Akainu, like he killed Ace. And I'm like, to me, it's still more satisfying to see Kobe be the one to get the justice for that. Because to me, it's a little bit more poetic. And I think that it serves Luffy better. Anyway, we don't have to do Admiral matchups now. We can stick to this chapter.
No. I will say that it's probably worth noting because I've seen this a lot lately. A lot of people trying to like predict final matchups and everything. I get the impression that that's not how this is going to work. This is not going to be 4 or 5 fights in disparate locations.
I agree, yeah.
I think the vibes, at least as they are right now, are that we're probably going to see more of a tiered structure. Pretty much everybody involved in this arc right now has been in multiple fights at this point. This arc with each other. Like it is completely reasonable to expect that like Luffy goes toes with Kuzan for a bit and wears him out, and then somebody bats cleanup if necessary, or the other way around. Well, right? Like that seems entirely feasible. It's possible we get Straw Hat team-ups again, which is a thing that I have wanted for quite a bit of time, and we haven't gotten too much of. We got some of, thankfully, in Wano, but I want that Thriller Bark. Like, that's one of the things in Thriller Bark that I just adore, is just that full team,
full court
crew
press.
V1, full court press. Like, the Straw Hats are best when they're together, so it is kind of sometimes a little bit of a bummer that, like, they don't always participate in those fights together. But it does seem like we're heading in that direction where we will be able to get those pairings a little bit more. Same with opponents. I don't think Akainu doesn't fight again until it's time to fight Luffy, right? Like, it doesn't seem like we're going that way. I don't
saw him fight Kuma.
Yeah, right? Like, yeah, just this arc. We saw him fight Kuma, just this arc. But, like, even when it comes to Straw Hats, I don't think he goes straight. Like, he probably wants to go straight for Luffy. I don't think anybody just lets that happen. You know, the Gorosei, they're like, oh, well, this Straw Hat can fight this Gorosei. Clearly, this is going to be a situation where it's going to take some stinking effort. So I don't think that breaks down. It's, you know, ironically, Naruto is actually a pretty good example of this, where it blew up and got very, very dense and frankly a slog. But the point of that was to set these expectations that, like, this literally can't just be Naruto Super Saiyans in and fights the one guy one-on-one and then this ends. Like, right, it requires actually coming back around to this team unit, really getting back to that idea of you know, restoring that found family in the case of Naruto to resolve the actual situation. What if Kakashi did something? And you know, One Piece doesn't have to do that, but I do think that we are heading in a direction where, you know, it's not 1v1s, or at least it's not 1v1 per person, you know what I mean?
I just got another note from our producer, Ricky D. Pirate. John, you promiscuous fool. Kobe has way more reason to fight Kuzan at this point because of what happened with Garp in literally this arc. Sorry, Ricky D. Pirate, I failed you yet again. But sure enough, I think it's easy enough to say that Kobe has beef with everybody. But there you go.
I do like that idea. I do like that idea, though, because it's ideology, right? Like, they both kind of have had their views on justice change over the years.
Yeah. Iron Giants, last beat of this chapter, apparently apologizing to Joy Boy. There's been a lot of chatter. There have been a lot of folks being like, what does this mean? Why is the giant marching through the island? What's going to happen next between the giant and Luffy? Are we going to get some sort of major revelation? I mean, the timing is interesting. We're at 6 minutes. It seems like it's a minute per chapter. So theoretically, we could be 6 chapters away. I'm not sure what happens in that time. That's a lot of time for all the characters kind of being on the move. But what are you thinking, Travis, of like the timing of the giant being the thing that, like, a massive revelation that goes along with Vegapunk's message? But then I know we kind of tossed this last week about, like, what if the Iron Giant is the disruption, is the way forward, you know, for the Straw Hats to actually escape at this point? I know we've been holding on to this idea that Luffy gets captured and maybe Luffy gets separated or something kind of happens there to sort of split the Straw Hats up, and some of them go to Elbaf, some don't. But it's looking more and more like anything really could happen here. They could make it out. I just wonder what the consequence is really going to be, because I just feel like the Straw Hats can't escape this thing unscathed. It's kind of like what happened with Jinbei at Whole Cake Island, right? He wasn't able to escape with them. He had to stay behind for the Sun Pirates. And there were a lot of issues there. Like Pudding had to erase Sanji's mind. So like there's going to be some bad stuff coming. I'm just really curious what it's going to be. I mean, Vegapunk did already die, to be fair.
Yeah. Vegapunk has died for sure. The Iron Giant talking is big, obviously.
And is it using its voice? Because it's like, it seems to be like what it's, they said it's muttering something, but then bubbles.
That's what it seems. But the bubbles seem like the voice of all things. So what if it is like a mechanical whir, and then like that's being filtered through with some sort of thought process? Zunesha is kind of the first thing that I thought of with all of this, right? Zunesha committed some kind of crime, is serving some sort of sentence, basically.
Yeah, there's a theory that's been circulating for a while about that has resurfaced, of that Zunesha betrayed Joy Boy and was still punished for like ever being like affiliated with Joy Boy, and that's why Zunesha has to walk the world the way that they do, but that they've been waiting to redeem themselves for betraying Joy Boy and right that wrong. And so people have been connecting that to the Iron Giant being involved in the same scenario. But then the other thing that people like have been noting about this, because the anime is currently showing this, so people have been re-upping on what the giant situation is. And even Robin notes, I don't remember if the manga even did this, but Robin notes that 200 years ago when the giant attacked, that's when the fishmen got their rights. And so I saw a little bit of like theory crafting, people trying to say like, oh, what if it's not necessarily just Luffy's heartbeat? It's the drumbeat of liberation. It's the song. And you and I did craft that theory too last week, right? We talked about how, you know, maybe it really is like a song that like the slaves of this world, that's why they get stamped out. That's why they're so afraid of like Nika being invoked, because that's the simple enough thing that can awaken these creatures. Maybe that's the key to like everybody having the voice of all things, if they kind of channel like a broadcast or a frequency, this kind of song or something. That would be kind of interesting, right?
Like some kind of narrative story bomb, or it's like a spirit bomb, but not necessarily in a weaponized sense. But that's an interesting idea. Yeah, like through music, through a story, right? Like that's not nothing. I'm very curious to see what happens with this. Again, it's one of those things where I keep getting the sense that if we are actually going to get a scene where someone sits down with Luffy and tries to explain to him what's going on. You know, we've kind of tiptoed around whether or not he would even care, or if he would just literally like stumble backwards into being the hero of the world, which I still think is more or less what's going to happen. But, you know, you've had Vegapunk pointed out, you've had Bonnie pointed out, you've had the Giants pointed out, the ladder of the Giants and Bonnie all have said it directly to Luffy. Eventually, someone is going to have to explain that. Is it this giant robot thing? I don't know. What I will say, though, is Vegapunk was convinced that this thing could not move, that there was nothing like active inside of it. When we met him, he was half phased through the thing. He's been inside of this. So whatever this really means, it does feel like it is connected to Kuma and the reality of his current state, more or less, is more machine than man, but still having will. It seems that this is what we are getting with the giant, finally, is that confirmation. We've talked about it before, but it really seems like this is a lock.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so curious about it, just because they note that it's bigger than like a giant, like a regular giant, which means that it does seem to be a separate thing. It has the ogre horns, right? Who knows? Maybe that's armor. We don't know. We don't know what this thing is, because it eerily looks kind of similar to the Onigashima thing, right? Like if this is like the husk, the armor of the Onigashima giant, like how cool would that be?
I like the idea of like a living armor kind of situation. Maybe this is some delicious indulgence on my brain, but like the idea of an inanimate suit of armor that like has had will imparted into it is a cool idea, because it would click, I think, with everything without getting a little too far off base. Yeah.
Okay. I think, speaking of getting off base, time to read the comments. And there are some doozies here. So I should point this out. I'm just guessing there are doozies. I never read the comments beforehand. This is always a surprise to me too. So there was a little bit of confusion of that. People were like, "Hey, you read comments that are kind of similar to stuff that y'all talked about." And I was like, "Yeah, I read the comments for the first time on the air. This is live radio, people, in a weird way." But anyway, here is James Roca 5311. Comment, I think that Kizaru will help the Straw Hats because he said, quote, yes, I am rooted very deeply, so I think this means that the events at Egghead have been taking a very emotional toll on Kizaru. I'm sorry, I don't know. We have to say this every week. Kizaru's not, he's not going to help. No, he's not going to, no, he's not. We have to just give up on this. Like, I was there with you. I thought maybe, yeah, no, he's not going to do it.
I have nothing to add besides also no. Yeah, sounds about right.
I'm sorry to say. Straw Hat Luffy 7 said, despite how intense things are getting and how high the stakes are, this chapter was pretty funny. Luffy and the giants seem to be enjoying themselves amidst the chaos. Rest well, Oda-sensei. Can't wait to see what happens next. Yes, definitely rest well, Oda. He's been cooking with gas, and I think that he deserves this 3-week break so he can... Honestly, I think he's probably really going through it right now, especially with Toriyama's passing. And I'm glad that he's getting the break he deserves. And then also, yeah, this chapter was funny. It really is a fun contrast. I know you kind of mentioned, Travis, already that like Luffy does get a little serious. He's like, guys, we gotta go, but they are still having fun. They're laughing. It is what makes One Piece fun, honestly.
Yeah, it is. That levity is as much a part of it as everything else. If you can't have the jokes, then you don't have One Piece, because that's how Oda structures things. It's all in service of having that fun time. He's a writer who has made custom laughs for every single prominent character. Side characters get their own custom laughs. It is built into the core of the series. It's why Gear 5th works so well. I know that it's a tonal shift for a lot of people, but you cannot say that it's out of nowhere. You cannot say that it's story breaking. You can't say that it takes the tension out of things, because he put the stupid teeth in his mouth all the way back in East Blue. He was the angriest he had ever been up until that point in the story, and that man was still getting his feet stuck in concrete. Like, it has always been this way.
Pushing zombies back into graves. That's our guy.
Exactly.
All right, Bubblegum R said, are the Elders ancient weapons as well? Didn't really connect with me until now, but they all have planet-based names. So yeah, people have been speculating about this for a long, long time, because the Gorosei, the 5 Elder Stars, when you translate it in Japanese, stars, it's really more like celestial bodies. It's more sort of like, if you translate the kanji, it can also be translated as 5 elder planets. So it's kind of difficult to really capture. It's like not a perfect translation, and celestial bodies is about the closest we can get. So think the idea of like a large mass out in space. It could be a star, it could be a big asteroid, it could be a planet, it could be all these things, it could be the moon. NL check. But the idea of them being ancient weapons, I think, is something that I think has already been kind of pushed to the side, because we know ancient weapons are a little different, right? I think like the idea of like Poseidon, Neptune, I think the way that it's been phrased and described makes me think that no, but they are maybe related. That's not like we have a lot of information on this.
So this is one of those things where I lean towards Artur, because he is the scholar, so to speak. The planets that the Gorosei represent, right, take the form of the original, like, Greco-Roman planets, like the first ones discovered.
Jupiter. Yeah, so there is a difference between that.
Correct.
And like Poseidon, Neptune, like Pluton. It is different.
It is, yeah. So the idea is that the ancient weapons would be like the new history, and the Gorosei represent the old history of the world. And of course, the idea that basically we have this whole cosmology theory. So Luffy is the sun god, planets all revolve around the sun, ultimately, as we know in science. But, at that time when we were still learning about how our solar system works so far back, there was the theory that all the planets and stars revolved around the Earth. And so some people have extrapolated that represents Emu as that form. And so that's kind of this delineation. It is all extrapolation, more or less, based on this. When it comes to either using the word planet or star, I'm going to be honest with you, just as an English speaker, star is so much cooler. It's so much cooler for the content. Exactly. It's just like, I see why that's the translation that they ultimately went through. Like celestial body, we're going to say star. For us, it's star.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth mentioning just a little bit that don't forget about the minx and the moon, Sulong form. There might be something to that as well in terms of like weapons or like creatures being able to become like powerful weapons thanks to celestial bodies. There's stuff there. There's lore there. Dad Help said, what if the elders were all beasts from Elbaf that ate human fruits? I'm tired, Travis. I just, what if, I guess. I don't know. Sure. Maybe.
That sounds like a great SBS question. I don't want to discount it because that's always fun, and that sounds like a thing that Oda would have some lore. If Oda is going to write a line, he's got some sort of note somewhere that he came up with it, right? He doesn't just say things. He says things and then goes, oh, that's a cool idea. I better write this down for that. If we do go to Elbaf, it would be interesting to see some of these big creatures. Maybe if Elbaf does have records of like Nika or their version of Nika, so to speak, maybe they have records of these beings as well.
M. Joker Boy, familiar commenter there, said, Zunesha also did apologize to Joy Boy, same with this robot. Something must have really happened 800 years ago. My theory is they weren't able to help Joy Boy when he needed them. It must be the war between the Ancient Kingdom and the Yokais, the Celestial D, and the World Government 800 years ago. Obviously, World Government wins this war. So, and Joy Boy apologized for failing his promise too, right? In the Fishman Island poneglyph, which is our first mention of Joy Boy. So, my thinking is that, to me, it really feels more like they betrayed them and like sided with the world government or something like that. And I'm anxious to get this flashback. I just think it's going to be so interesting, and I wonder if Vegapunk's message could be something that triggers part of it. Never not hope. Travis, we got parts of God Valley in this arc. I'm holding out hope because I just think there's going to be I could see an entire arc just dedicated to the legend of Joy Boy. Like literally 50 to 70 chapters.
Could you imagine what we would all be like if that message starts and it cuts to an ancient kingdom flashback? Could you imagine how
in 2025?
Yeah,
like all right, back to the Bonnie versus the Vice Admirals.
Right. Like we would lose our minds. It would. I genuinely would not know how to react. I would be elated. I would be shocked. I would be, oh God, not again, not another one. All at once. It would be some of the most complex emotions ever. I almost want him to do it just to see what it would do to people.
Sun God Nika Joyboy, great name, said, this is my favorite ability hands down. We can tell. Everything about Luffy is so fun and positive during Gear 5th. I'm laughing so hard at the fact he can just rearrange his scars or face like it's a sticker. That's exactly, we're having fun reading it. That's why it works. It's like, honestly, I was watching this Instagram reel of like the moment when Goku first becomes Ultra Instinct. And I just remember like watching that and being like, it's just more Super Saiyan, and it wasn't that fun to watch the Tournament of Power because it just felt like it was such a repeat. I mean, it was cool and all, but I don't know. This to me is just like, this is fun. It makes me feel like a kid again watching Looney Tunes. It really does. And I love the goofy logic of it. It's just wonderful. I couldn't love it anymore if I tried.
Well, that's exactly what Oda was going for, was trying to bring it back around to that spirit. That was the exact mission statement. So if that's how you feel, 100% success, Oda.
Snicker Snack said, been nice knowing you, Kaku, unless Lucci saves you. Looking forward to all elders, man-beast forms. Wonder if Shandians will also recognize Luffy as the sun god since their civilization persisted like the giants. Ooh, that's a good point. Iron Giant apologizing to Joy Boy made me remember that Zunesha also had something to apologize for, and they are both gigantic. Take a good rest, Oda. Yeah, I mean, lots of stuff here. I would say that the gigantic thing, we also know that Joy Boy was probably big because of the straw hat. We also, Buccaneers, if there were more of them a few hundred years ago, there could be something related to that and the giant attacking Marijoa 200 years ago. So that's worth keeping in the lore too. I love the idea of the Shandians coming back in the story, and that was our first time, right? Skypiea is the first time we get the hint of the sun god Nika. So that would be a great full circle moment. And the whole thing with Kaku. Yeah, does he die? I don't know. I don't know if Lucci die? How's Lucci getting out of this? I don't know. Maybe the Seraphim escape with Kaku and then they go with Lucci and cover story. Who knows?
Yeah, this is a weird one because this is the first time that we really see the mask slip in a non-cover story. And even then, let's be real. Like, it's clear that Lucci is at this point actually fighting for the sake of somebody else. He actually does have a relationship with people, particularly his CP0 teammates, Kaku in specific. So it's like, it's kind of amazing after all this time to see that man of all people begging for the life of someone else. It's wild to think about. It's great because it's that grand reminder that anybody who comes into contact with Luffy comes away changed in some way. But, I guess I should say, with the exception of the Gorosei, probably. But at the same time, it feels like it's too little too late. Like even if this goes badly and Lucci feels betrayed, and so he's finally leaving the government, like he could have the first time that opportunity presented itself. What does this man do from here? It really feels like we're done with him, or we will be done with him. Mm-hmm. Does he join the revolutionaries? Is that where I'm trying to figure out, like, what do you even do with him if he doesn't just stick around and be a mook?
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of ready for a Law, Kid, and Luffy reunion at Elbaf next, because it's kind of where the three of them are all headed, and it would be kind of funny. Be like, hey, wait, why are we back in this situation again? But yeah. Adams K0 said, he quotes, "And he must be crushed before you call him something else." So Adams K0 says to that, Luffy's later power-ups might come as the faith in Nika spreads. He might have the risk of losing himself to Nika's personality as that side of their power grows. Also, there's the possibility that the original Joy Boy was a buccaneer. They're half giants and carried the faith in Nika. That would explain why the elders were genocidal, or went genocidal on that race. If you want to kill a god, you need to kill the faith. Basically, a large-scale version of the weak point in Bonnie's distorted future. Oh yeah, it was said a very long time ago. A man dies when he is forgotten. Yeah, I think we've talked about this kind of stuff before, like the idea of Joy Boy being a buccaneer for sure, and Nika being something that kind of spreads as a story. I don't know if it's something that makes Luffy stronger, but I do think there's something to it being related to how Luffy inspires the people around him and kind of like rallies people together. And that would make sense because that would be the real tragedy of Joy Boy and his downfall, right? Is that when it came down to it, the people that he trusted to help him didn't help him, right? And that is more poetic. But yeah, I mean, jury's still out on Joy Boy being a buccaneer. It makes more sense just based on the idea of everybody being a giant back then. But yeah, what do you think?
I think it's worth noting that like the Joy Boy of the past probably wasn't like a one-to-one Luffy analog, or at least at first, because there are things like the tone of Joy Boy's farewell, for example. It doesn't really feel like a Luffy-esque way of saying that. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where they must be similar, but I don't think this is going to be a one-to-one situation. So whatever happened, I would love, for example, if it wasn't like a stone cold betrayal, but rather a deception. Like one person betrayed them and it led to everybody else being misled rather than like intentionally like making the wrong decision, if that makes sense. And subsequently why Lily would have done the double cross in the opposite direction, right? To open a pathway to possibly redeem everyone, that kind of thing.
Sun Barrack said that giant robot might have been the first attempt or the real version of the cool robot that Vegapunk mentioned he wanted to build at the start of Egghead arc. Thinking about it now. So yeah, if you recall, Vegapunk actually says outright that he based the Vega Force 1 on the Iron Giant. So he used that Iron Giant design to make the technology of it. Yeah. And I think the anime is at that point too and getting into that stuff. So that's fun. Adams K0 said, nice touch with the 56 Gomu on the bat and helmet. He's getting more and more like a tune. Yeah, for those folks who didn't know or may have forgotten, 56 is Luffy's number because that's literally Gomu, which I find confusing with Japanese, but that's a whole other conversation. Because 6, I learned 6 as Roku, but anyway. And then I think that's it. But we do have in the Discord, Hippo asked, choose another devil fruit ability for Luffy. Another devil fruit ability. What do you think, Travis? It can be anyone you want. I say give him Big Moms.
Give him Big Moms. You know,
it's the most toonish.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I kind of like, people were kicking around like an actual rubber awakening for Luffy. So like if he wasn't actually the Hito no Mi, but it was actually the gum fruit, it was actually a rubber fruit. The idea that this could evolve into just making other things rubber, like uniquely, still sounds very interesting to me. The idea that could be upgraded into even like the development of resin, like potentially like making like resin fists or something.
Yeah.
That all sounds like a very fun time. I know that's kind of cheating because it's like, what if he just had the same powers he had up until this moment in the story? But like, I think a lot of Luffy's design is baked right into his power set. Like from the jump, like everything from like the short sleeves and the shorts, like that augments just the very nature of his stretching, right? So it would be to give Luffy just like a drastically different devil fruit would be like, okay, well, what else changes about Luffy? Like, let's make another guy. But I do kind of like the resin man idea. I thought that was a fun theory, and if that had been how things were gone, I would have enjoyed it probably just as much.
I don't think I would have enjoyed it just as much, but I mean,
it would be funny. It would be funny still.
I guess. I'm just so enamored at this point. I also posted in the Discord, I put, what if, hear me out, what if the key to beating the Gorosei is in the poneglyphs, and once Robin wakes up, she'll know what to do. Hence, they want poneglyphs done and gone, that being the Gorosei. I tagged you, Travis. I said, I know you're traveling, but for example, maybe the history they're trying to erase has to do with how their powers work and how the ancient kingdom fought against them. You didn't respond, but Hippo did say she won't simply wake up, that is Robin. She will awaken. I think it'd be funny. I'm assuming you hate this idea.
I don't hate this. I was just in PAX, so I didn't really read like full.
Let Quinn handle this.
Full confession of just like I saw you tagged me, and I said to Evan, John is sending me messages at Discord, and I do not have the time to look at them.
I don't have the
energy.
I
feel bad, but
I don't feel bad. You dodged the bullet.
I do think that the poneglyphs, they must contain information, right? That makes sense to me. Because, we have the road poneglyphs that lead to Laughtail, but there are the others. If the time was taken to seed all of these, if that was the point of Lily's like double cross on the 23 kingdoms, then they must serve a purpose, right? Mm-hmm. There has to be something there. And, we've only seen Robin actually like live translate a few of them at a time. And the first time we saw her do it, she was lying. So that I would very much like to see one of these all the way translated. I think you have a very strong lead there, even if it's not like an instruction manual to how to beat these guys. I do think that an explanation of what they are could very much be in there.
Especially if Robin wakes up and it's just like, oh, I know what this is. Uh-oh. And then it could lead to a clue or something.
Notably to that point, when they're confronted with Saturn originally, Vegapunk is not exactly, he doesn't have the same reaction as everyone else, right? Mm-hmm. Even Lucci, like I said, the top of this was awestruck, but Vegapunk was just like, Saturn, is that you?
Not
and it's
you
just
again.
Like, and I don't think it's that he knew that those were their forms, at least when he met them, so much as he's learned something.
Yeah. He probably figured. He was like, yeah, I always had an idea that these guys weren't on the up and up. I put out this thing. I read this, another fun theory. I think this one was on Reddit too. So the idea here, and I added my own stuff to it, Emu is controlling the water of the planet in order to keep devil fruit users from going into the sea. Emu is the sea devil that hates devil fruit users. And that makes sense because it makes the Fishman Island prophecy more difficult to fulfill. So the idea was that something that happened 800 years ago had to do with the devil fruits. It had to do with trying to keep people from using like the powers of the sea in order to basically like stop the world government. I think that could be a fun answer to like why devil fruits are the way they are. Because we just know that like the sea devil hates devil fruit users and that's why they sink. But if emu was something that had some kind of, and then, you know, I did respond to this quote, John, that theory has been around for months. Keep up, kid, end quote, by you, Travis Hymas, and the user King of the Pirates in perfect unison. So I'll let you dress Rosa me at this point.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like I was saying with like the cosmology thing earlier, like this idea that like emu is kind of like the source of all of these things. Specifically, that emu doesn't specifically represent the Earth as a planet as much as emu represents the sea, or umi, just literally flipping the word around. That's kind of where this theory leads, is that emu is the origin point for devil fruits, and that's why you can't swim, is because you become subservient to the sea. So more or less kind of what you were looking at. And so again,
it's cool.
It's a cool idea. I think I mentioned last week that like I don't fully buy the origin of devil fruits as we currently have it as like a complete explanation. So, you know, this could work. It's again one of those things where I don't want to Kaguya up this final saga. I don't want this to become. I personally like the idea more that these are just mortals who have, like Luffy, kind of ascended in some way or another, rather than like, oh, it was just demons the whole time, or it was just like this mythological situation.
You want to see the young Gorosei 800 years ago.
Yes.
Those persnickety old
absolutely
guffawing, goons.
I want to see why Top Man has the name with his flowing, luscious locks of hair. You know, like
I'm with you.
Let's be real.
The last thing in the Discord was just, I mean, we've gone pretty long, but I really do want to see a Kizaru in the next cover story for our post Egghead cover story. Look, there are plenty of other options. There's lots of stuff that could happen here, like Caribou with the Blackbeard pirates or something, or, you know, I already mentioned the Seraphim getting their own thing, but watching Kizaru and Sentomaru on like a little adventure and running into the Cross Guild, I gave it a little fake name, Broken Borsalino. I will find a new guiding light. I just like the idea of like, yeah, Kizaru just wandering around, just being like, what do I do now? And pulling a Kuzan. Now, I mean, it could always be that he stays in the world government because he's a clown. He's he makes Buggy look like an accountant. But whatever. I think that could be interesting. I think that if he had redemption at all, it wouldn't be full on, but there could be a moment where he and Sentomaru kind of reconcile. That would be kind of touching in its own way, I guess.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens, because it really does feel like this is one of those things where they could easily go, hey, you really screwed this up, buddy, and like put him on the chopping block, literally in this case. But at the same time, is that tactful? Is that a good military decision? Is that reasonable at all to do, considering he did more or less do the job? Mm-hmm. Like, it took a lot more to get it done than you would think, but like Vegapunk was breathing when Saturn stabbed him. He wasn't when Kizaru blasted him, as far as we could tell. So you can't really say he didn't do his mission. He succeeded. Like they have York. Vegapunk is dead. It's a crapshoot how they got there, but they did get there. So are they gonna like fire him? Is that what happens? I don't know. I do like
I could see
the
a temperamental
idea that
emu kind of taking him out.
Right.
You know.
It's one of those things where maybe it's so bad it doesn't matter. I do like the idea of taking Kizaru and running with him as a character, because even with all of this, I still feel like he is the least, except with even Green Bull, like his introduction just comes out so strong and tells us who he is and what his deal is, that like I don't need that man's backstory. But Kizaru is still someone who I would like to see that backstory for, like genuinely, like his flashback.
He's the real Cypher among all these,
he
even
really
among Cypher
is.
Pole.
even now, even knowing what we know and everything that we've seen, he still is. It's so difficult to get a read on exactly what he's doing. So I would like to explore that, similar to the ways we've explored the other original admirals, I think.
I lied. There's one last comment and we're done. I missed this one before. Black Knight Halberd 42. I'm so sorry. Probably my favorite color spread for this series ever. It's a great melancholy, if only, sort of scene, and the colors are effing mesmerizing. But now I crave fries. Man alive, I hope Bonnie joins the crew. Didn't think I could even want anyone else to join after Yamato fell through, but Bonnie won me over like I never could have foreseen. Anyone who can hate Gear 5 just hates the concept of fun. Nice little addition there. Yeah, Travis, the Bonnie for Straw Hat movement, cause, rebellion, Revolutionary Army, whatever you want to call it, it's picking up new members every day. We're going pretty strong. We have meetings every single Tuesday, Thursday, but also Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to be fair. And I'm glad you're on the ship too. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, I got to admit, you've got me more or less convinced. Like if she doesn't join, I'm not gonna like shed a tear over it because I'm perfectly fine with how things are right now. Yeah, I'll
shed 2 tears. I'll shed 3 or 4.
But yeah, you'll shed them for me. But it does. You've convinced me for sure that like it's going to be a lot harder of a sell to put her literally anywhere else. So you got to do something. I mean, Oda's not going to kill her. She's a kid. That's off the table. She's surviving this. It's just a matter of where.
I don't know if she'll survive. Not like not getting adopted by Nami at this point, but we'll see. Because Otama got adopted pretty much, right? So
yeah, the cover story highlights Nami with Bonnie, but at this point in the story, I don't know that Nami knows the truth. You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting to see how that reaction would be. It might be a situation where like Nami just decides like, oh, we're at sea. You're a child. Okay, Luffy, she's one of us now, and he's like in his, beating cage already for eating all their food again and being like, okay, sure, that's fine.
But then Travis, the real controversy would be, what about Bonnie and Kuma? Particularly a Kuma who is comatose, essentially, doesn't talk, just kind of follows Bonnie around and works on pure instinct, just like the silent Straw Hat who, protects Bonnie all the time. I don't hate it. I know we kind of were anticipating he was going to die, and like that still could happen. This arc isn't over, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, come on. What do you think?
I think we've gotten the closure. I think it's one of those things where Kuma just, let's be real, he deserves a more focused send off. So we just haven't done it yet. Like it's one of those things where like the de-escalation of the arc as we do the transition, we're gonna get the big saying goodbye thing. I think we'll probably find out that like Bonnie is aware of some sort of buccaneer like death ritual.
You think he's gonna get a going merry scene? Travis,
I think he's gonna get a going merry scene. I think that's how this goes. Like going merry was kind of what I was implying there. Like I think that's how this goes. To give her the real good cry, to get, really close that arc. The idea of him lugging around in his state still just feels cruel. And boy, howdy, has Oda been cruel enough to this man. But also it's that found family aspect, right? Like a part of why Saul and Zeph and Nami's village, all of these people were willing to let go of these people they were caretaking or loved, was because they knew that they would be okay eventually, or okay eventually in the case of Robin, but okay in the moment for most of them. Like Frankie's family was like, go, like we've had these moments for everybody else because joining the Straw Hats is where they belong. So if Bonnie is going to join, she needs to have that too. She cannot be carrying around her baggage around like an anchor. A literal anchor in this case. Like it doesn't feel fair to Kuma, and it really doesn't feel fair to her.
It's not fair to me.
I mean, I know it's gonna make you bawl like a baby again, but it would be appropriate. I think that's the main thing. Is just like Kuma deserves a dedicated send off.
That'll do it. That's our send-off for Wiki Pirate Radio this week. Went a little extra long this week, but I think it was well-deserved. We have 3 weeks off, and so if you're in the Discord, you can always hang out with us and find out what is going on, what we're going to be covering next. We might do an anime roundtable. We could always do a feedback episode, answer some questions, whatever you like. Just hit us up if you have any suggestions. And I know Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, that's already... I know. We never got to it, but I did watch it, and everyone can rejoice. But yes, we'll be back, and thanks so much for listening. We're going to set sail now. See you, everybody.